the worst person. Chevy Chase. He looked so out of it.
Chevy Chase is.
Hey, Chloe.
You know, long coat. Is she wearing just her leggings?
Yeah,
How you been?
Yeah.
Good. So are you at home, Florida, the islands?
I'm in Florida. My flight was canceled last night to get back to DC.
Of course.
You've been stuck in Florida all winter, missing all that
For a
snow.
very long time.
Wow. You might as well just stay. So we've got 3 weeks until spring break. Just
That's
I mean,
crazy.
people I
I
don't
know.
even think are going to recognize me when I go back. It's absurd at this point.
You'll need a transfer slip, new student from.
Used to.
Introduce myself all over again.
Right? I knew I was missing something.
What'd you forget?
My binder. Nah. I'll see how much I know today.
It's the 60s.
What it will get me is more
Is it Hannah?
All right, Chloe. Who's the other girl from Winter Park? It's Sabrina and. Mm-hmm.
What?
The two girls from Winter Park is Sabrina and. I forgot my list on my desk that I keep down here to just remind me of everyone's names.
You have 15 minutes.
I can't remember who the other one is.
It's like a pop quiz.
It is like a pop quiz for.
Serena and
I feel like it's Hannah, but
it's
And Marae is you and Amanda.
Me and Amanda. Hannah was supposed to be, so it's not Hannah.
No, it's not Hannah, but it's Amanda and Chloe or Marae. Delaney is Canterbury. Rebecca, Mackenzie, Tristan, and Simpson are Nashville. I just can't remember that one girl's name from Winter Park. And I think Sabrina is the girl, the blonde-headed girl. And it's the brown-headed one. I can't remember. My mind is just completely erased this
Go
morning.
to we'll go to the emails you sent us, and it's gonna be here.
That's a really good idea.
Maybe.
Why didn't one of you Country Day people think about
because
that?
I'm on iTunes. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Now I'm gonna illegally download a movie.
I've stopped paying attention.
I'm getting in the zone for this class.
It's not an excuse you can use.
I'm going to my mind palace.
Mind Palace. That's a new one. I haven't heard that before.
You do not watch Sherlock? Oh,
You know what? I haven't watched Sherlock since the first 2 episodes. So.
you uncultured swine.
No, you cannot call me an uncultured swine. I am cultured very well. Aw, man. Where's my time to go? Uncultured swine. It's my line.
Sherlock is so great though.
Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch is my favorite embodiment of him.
You haven't even seen it.
I've seen the first 2 episodes,
Then you should know what I was talking about.
but it's been a very long time since they first came out. That's how long it's been. I think I've watched like 6 of the shows since. Are you watching Better Call Saul?
I didn't really even like Breaking Bad, so.
Okay.
Oh. There you go. Good morning, Florida. Winter Park. Unmuted and then just wave our hand.
Yeah.
Hey.
Okay.
What's up? Oh, my thing's not open.
order for us to get off the thing.
Let them hear all
Okay,
this too.
so we finally leave. I have like a 45-minute layover, and I am like, as soon as I hit the ground, I am running. Also, just like for mental image of like what I am doing, I have like this huge, giant like Carhartt brown jacket. It is the ugliest thing you've ever seen. Okay, it is disgusting and it is huge and it's very unwieldy. I have my carry-on like duffel bag and my backpack, and I'm like running through to get to Terminal D to get my connecting flight. Only that it's not this Terminal D. Oh no! It is Terminal D over here, which comes out of Terminal C, and these all have their own. Is that not the most absurd thing you've ever heard of in your life?
Oh, that's so
But I
cool.
made it.
But she made it.
Yeah, I was in tears,
Track
and I
star
had to, like,
Libby
take a
Kerrigan.
shuttle, and I made it.
And with that, I give you Imson.
But is that not dumb? So
Ready
just
for
like
test?
if you go to LaGuardia, okay, just know
I'm,
and like
petrified.
what we went back.
They heard
They
the whole.
they hurt.
Yeah, sorry.
Trick's fine. I don't remember the remodel times. I missed 2 days.
If y'all are taking the same test as us, it's fine.
I don't think we are.
All right, so we've got Winter Park, we got Delaney, Amanda, Chloe. Oh, Amanda, you're home today.
We're not that advanced.
Is it a day
Yeah,
off?
it's
or
a
is it
snow day. It's a snow day.
Y'all, how much school have y'all missed this year?
This is
Whoa.
the first day we missed.
Wow. Like, we can hear us, and then it's like,
That.
there. It would be better if I could see my hand gestures that go along with it. Nashville should be having school today. I don't know where they are.
They got it.
No, they got ice, right?
Yeah,
Did they get
it was,
ice?
it
I
was,
thought so.
Yeah, because that was the whole deal. I was like, I
It
couldn't
was.
go out anywhere because it was like everywhere was going crazy.
yeah, my mom took the
We just had bad weather this weekend. My mom was like, "Don't drive this weekend." I'm like,
All right. Do you would not have any reason to know this, but is Nashville on a snow day today, you think?
Oh my god, I never took the quiz.
Okay, well, I'm going to go over this now.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, same here.
Talk to you after class. We talked.
Okay. All right.
next.
Hold on.
Okay.
Time out.
All right, well, welcome back. Friday. Oh, there's no today's meet side room opened up today. Friday, during my little office hour time, I was all alone. The only people that joined were 2 other teachers so we could play with the software. So Mr. Ure and Mr. Beasley had a informal class on Friday with that. The quiz that was due by midnight on Friday. Yeah, okay, this explains why I'm missing some stuff.
Yeah.
Because some people did not take that.
I think it should
How did for those of you who took this, and I think Chloe emailed back and she said you really liked the format of this. Was this more, and I don't want to call it predictable, but was it more intelligible on your end? Yes. Okay. Everyone seems to be nodding their head up and down. All right, then I will probably just continue using that as the kind of the test mechanism. And whether they're, proctored or unproctored or, open book or closed note or, I can be convinced on any given day to go any of those directions with tests and quizzes for content. The reality of life is you're really never very far from something that can get you to where you need to be academically. But then the other side of that is when you're on Jeopardy and they ask you who the first Wall of Sound record producer was, you're not going to be able to go look up Phil Spector. So I think there's a balance in there of things that are good to know, just long term, of good conversational things. Then there are things that are really cool that I think you would. I mean, the stuff I think is cool that I want you to know is probably very different than what you think is cool and what you think you need to know. I said all that to say this. The remaining quizzes and tests for the remainder of the term, it will be a mixture of open book and closed book exams, but I will most likely stick exclusively to to that format you did on Friday. Those of you who did not do it, I would encourage you to complete that today for less than full credit. But I would go ahead and complete that today. There is not a cumulative final exam at the end of the term. Okay, so instead it'll be a longer written project that will be a kind of a synthesis of a lot of things that we've done over the term. So if you're wondering about long-term acquisition of, am I going to see this again on a final? Not in a traditional sense, but there will be things that I want you to be able to write about and put into your notes. So that's just, if you're wondering what's going on with that, that's what's going on with that. Do y'all have any other questions about the quiz or any other test type things? Chloe? Yes, ma'am. Chloe? Yeah. Oh, no, you're just like, we're good. Oh, you're giving me the thumbs up like we're good.
She's muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Does that work?
There you go.
Okay, sorry, it's like being weird. My other question was, where do we go to like get grades for like the other assignments that we've turned in for you?
Yeah, I'm still fighting with the grade book.
Okay.
I haven't found an alternative, like a shared Google Sheets that doesn't show everyone's grades for everything. Maybe today I can finally get the hack on the grade book finished. Irrespective, I'll email you your grades for these assignments. I was looking for a central place to return them all, but it's just that grade book is really problematic. So I'll email within the next day or so all of your stuff back and let you know about all those things. So that's the short answer of, I'm working on it, but you'll have them this week, some form or fashion. Fair question. Anything else? Tea or coffee, Amanda? What is that? It looks really good.
It's tea.
It's tea. All right. Well, I have none, so I'm just going to start talking then. I will say this, and none of my local people, please don't text outside of the room. At 10:40 today, we're going to have a fire drill, and what that means is that we're going to be gone for about 12 minutes. So during that 12 minutes, I don't know. By the time I leave and come back, it'll be time for me to say goodbye, and then we'll be wrapped up for the day. So we've got about 35 minutes until that happens. Did you know about the fire drill? So here we go. Let's get after this thing. What did y'all... Hopefully you've had a chance to read ahead and start looking at the 60s. And I know it took us 3-4 weeks to get here, but we really established some good framework and a good lens to look at the rest of the remaining decades through to see where we came from. So we do have, I feel like we've got a pretty good working knowledge of why some things are important, why some things aren't important, and how music has evolved. But the platter that's up there, or the record, the platter you see up there is the Ronettes. That's the same photo from the textbook. Why would they choose this to put in the book over any other thing as an example of a song from the 60s? Uh-oh, crickets. Way too many crickets. And this is not Buddy Holly and the Crickets. These are just crickets. Dun, dun, dun. Well, can you see let's just look under the title over there, the Ronettes, produced by...
Phil Spector.
Okay, here's the first, well, this is really the big reason. Why do we care about Phil Spector?
Influential in producing music.
All right. Allison says he's very influential in producing music. Right on. Okay, what makes him influential? I completely agree with this. But why do we care? Go ahead.
The way he produced it, he was like the first person to come up with his signature sound, which is like the wall of sound.
There we
having
go.
Like a lot of instruments put together on one like solid recording, and then like having different channels for like each thing.
There we go. So the wall of sound, Phil Spector and the wall of sound. Some things happen just because other things have happened. The big thing that led to Phil Spector was just an advance in technology. Until the late 50s, 58 to the early 60s, 63, technology in the recording studio, it was still very limited to monophonic sound, just one channel, and maybe 4 tracks in the recording studio. And just as things just kind of grow upon themselves, Phil Spector was a guy that was in the right place at the right time with the right look and had the right friends. And he really was an overnight success made from years in the business. The interesting thing about Spector is that he didn't come to the recording studio with just the engineering and the technical piece of knowing how to put music together, but he also had an arranging idea. Arrangement meaning like how the songs were written out, how he wanted the instrumentalist to play, how he thought he could combine those things to make his wall of sound. That's just one long. Okay, and now I'm bell scared. To make that wall of sound that he did. He did a lot of work with the Beach Boys later on and really helped them refine their sound. And the Beach Boys just have a certain sound that goes with them. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But as we get started in the late 50s, where does the music industry return to? It went home. Where's home?
Pop music for like super.
Geographically located home. Where are we geographically? Where did we return to? We went home to New York City. And where was our original home? Tin Pan Alley. So this time we've moved back to New York City, not back to Tin Pan Alley, the same site in New York that we knew before, but to the Brill Building. The Alden Music Company, which is short for who? Come on, y'all need to know this. Alden. Let's just start with Alden. Is that one name or two names? Two names. I'm starting to wonder how much of this y'all have read, because that is for Al and Don, is where the name Alden comes with. Al Nevins and Don Kirshner came up with Alden Music, and they went back to the idea of the Tin Pan Alley approach, that people worked for them, wrote music, brought it to them, and they, as a corporation, matched songs to artists. Instead of artists writing their stuff, they had staff writers and staff arrangers that would put things together, and then they would take it to whoever they thought would do the best job with this. So when we go down and come to some of the high points of the Brill approach, was that the artist is not really involved in the process of the song. They come in at the last minute, and then they would just record the chart, and then this is where we start to have the shift of songs. Before this, songs were the popular thing and not necessarily the artist. It's from this point of 1962 that we start to identify recordings with artists, and they become synonymous. That, Rock Around the Clock, that's Bill Haley in the Comets. Later example, Heartbreak Hotel, Elvis. We know that Elvis did that. It's been covered by a lot of other bands, but his is the recording that we know. And from really 62 forward, we have a much more entrenched idea that the artist and the song go together, even though the artist, for a long time still, in the pop side, is not writing their own music. This music that goes back to the Tin Pan Alley thing, this is music that is written still primarily for teenagers. You still have money, you're still buying stuff, and the corporate approach to this, we've got political, social, cultural, and the business of music. Well, Brill falls squarely in the business of music, that they were writing for money and producing for money. Now, the other three things are going to be reflected in the folk music movement that's going to start in 1963 with a really it's an interesting split in what happens musically, that until then, we really have there's the good boy, refined image, clean cut. That's certainly Bill Haley, Frankie Avalon, the guy that's sitting on Venice Beach. My mind has gone blank. Somebody help me out from that picture. Buddy Holly, that's not who I'm thinking about. Pat Boone. Okay, so all these clean cut guys are up to like 1953. Well, 53 happens, and we have this big split of good boy and now the bad boys on the scene, and we start to really have rock and roll as we know it, that comes out in 63. From 1957 to 1963, a lot of, arguably, they call that kind of the lost years in music, that we go into this slump from the late 50s to the early 60s. It's the in-between Elvis and Pat Boone era, where not a lot really happened musically, but it was a transitional things. Geographically, music started to shift to two centers. They started to go out to the coast. It started to go to New York City and out to L.A. A very early scene in L.A. in the early 60s. Spector split his time between New York and L.A., but tended to do more work in L.A. Later on in the 80s, I think, is when he got into and still, I think it's been decided that he did not kill his wife, but was involved in a big murder conspiracy that left one person dead, and it was his wife, but nobody really knows, did he do it or did he not do it. But Phil Spector's an interesting guy. I think tormented genius is probably a really good way to describe Spector. So the good guys that we've listed, Frankie Avalon, Bobby Darin, Neil Sedaka. Neil Sedaka is a huge songwriter, and not so much a performer, but as a songwriter. And these are all the people that are clean cut, that your parents would want you to like. These are not the bad guys. These guys didn't challenge the status quo, certainly not politically controversial. Wrote songs like Chubby Checker's not on here, but he wrote The Twist. And the twist being the way to dance without guys and girls touching each other. You just look at each other and you just twist. What an exciting night, right? The twist. Does anybody do the twist anymore? No. You see somebody doing the twist, you probably walk away from them because they're maybe kind of odd. I don't know. I haven't seen anyone do the twist since last Thursday, and that was just me on the way to my car. That's a joke. Okay. So, here we go. Here's just another image of the clean cut guys, and kind of the moving into the California Venice scene that's out in LA, but things are still moving over, but it's the hair, the late 50s, early 60s hair, clean cut, clean shaven, just good looking, country guys, kind of the would describe it around here. American Bandstand. Tell me somebody read and knows something about American Bandstand. Let's try this again. The sound of clacking of keyboards, waiting for me to espouse knowledge. Delaney, go. Oh, all right.
Wasn't it, there was they would have live music acts and people would dance on it, and Dick Clark was probably the most famous host. So it was just all of a sudden the music wasn't just on the radio, it had kind of taken over television as well.
Okay. Yes, Chloe, keep going with that.
I was just gonna say some adding on to that, something, it was really, really successful for a very long time, and that was very unexpected.
Yes. I'm trying to remember the guy he replaced. Bob Horn. The American Bandstand came on after school. It ran. How long did American Bandstand last? And what was Dick Clark's prediction for how long it would run? Chloe.
It lasted 32 years, right?
Yes, and he thought it was going to last.
Not that.
Not that. Well, he guessed 30 years. Dick Clark guessed 30 years, that if the show continued. Hang on, can you mute your? There you go, Chloe. That if he could maintain his time slot and the viewership, that he thought there was enough interest nationally that the show would run for 30 years. And this is a guess that he made in the 60s. Turns out, smart guy, because it did run for 32 years. He was the second host of American Bandstand, which was just Bandstand at the time. What happened to the first guy, Bob Horn? Oh.
He was drinking and driving or something.
DWI, yeah. He got picked up for driving under the influence of alcohol, DWI, and that was a very big deal, and it still is a huge deal, but so much so at that time that was a death sentence for Bob Horn, and had he not done that, we would never know who Dick Clark is. So it's just very interesting that now that a pop culture person or politicians get picked up for things that are so much worse, and it's just they probably really didn't mean to do it. And it's this really weird. We've been desensitized to a really interesting point that, what was wrong then is still wrong now, but nobody just seems to care as much. But so Dick Clark is around. The show runs for 90 minutes a day, 5 days a week. That's a lot of singing and dancing. That's a lot of acts. One of the things that the text does mention about American Bandstand, it starts off as just Bandstand, and it was not a nationally syndicated coast to coast show. After Dick Clark takes over from Bob Horn, he has the idea of making this more of a clear channel type operation, not on the radio but on television. So now we're going to show this show for 90 minutes a day across the country. Wives and college folks, they don't have to leave the house anymore. Because remember, guys are at work all day. The husbands are at work. Very nuclear family still. The wives are at home preparing dinner. But now, before their husband gets home, they get to watch an hour and a half of American Bandstand. You don't have to leave the house to have your recreational time anymore. This is a daily program that maybe the neighbors come over and you sit in the living room and you watch the teens of America dance and sing, and then before husband gets home, American Bandstand goes off, dinner's ready to go, and it's just a wonderful life, right? It's wonderful for somebody in there. Here comes the boss. You walked in just the right time. We're talking about American Bandstand.
I dance to music. I'm just kidding.
Did you ever watch American Bandstand? A couple times.
Come on.
Dick Clark. So Bandstand comes on. It runs for the hour and a half. You don't have to leave the house for the entertainment now. And it really symbolized another big shift of going from radio broadcasting to television broadcasting, that we can not just hear the performers now, but now we get to see them. And you also get to see geographically, the people in New York now get to see what the people in Los Angeles are dancing like, and vice versa. People in Los Angeles get to see what New York's doing, and Texas, and Florida, Chicago, Philadelphia. And within these different pockets around the country, with the Motown Center still being Philadelphia and Detroit, we've got pockets there that we see, but then later on they develop their own TV shows. The folks in New York, very different. That's still we're early on in the hippie movement, the folks singing Greenwich Village, so they're already going in a different direction, and Los Angeles winds up being kind of the center of normalcy of what is not the weird activity. And I always think I associate California as kind of like the weird activity going on at the time, but it really starts out a couple years before that in Greenwich in New York City. So the performers, I've got up there, it's lip synced. The technology of the day wasn't such that they could really come in and do big live performances. So you'd come in and you'd have, typically it was just the main singer, the performer, that would sing, and they would sing to a backing track, and it was lip synced. So we've been lip syncing since '62, and I don't know why people were so shocked when, in the 80s, Milli Vanilli gets in trouble for lip syncing. They've been doing this for 25 years, but they just did it so poorly. I think that was what aggravated everyone, was that it was just so bad. And then with as much as anything else, the vision of teens was reinforced in a very popular manner in American Bandstand. It wasn't hokum style music, certainly, that wasn't on there. It was things that were thought to be good for the entire family. You could sit down and it was safe programming, and you didn't have to worry about the evils or the bad side of rhythm and blues coming into this and polluting the minds of the young children, as music has famously been blamed for doing. We're responsible for so many things that have gone wrong, the course of history. I'd like to think music has that kind of power, but I don't know that we do. And a lot of other stuff goes in there with it. And here's Chubby Checker doing the twist, right? So this is a huge deal because you can dance without touching people. You just do the twist, you just stare at them and swing your arms. And if you want to know what the twist looks like, go YouTube that. I'm not going to dance the twist for you in here because some things you just can't unsee if that happens. There we go. So here we come. Leading up to the 40s, we still have folk singers, and they are, it says up here, they seem more real than commercial music. And this is why we've spent this time before this talking about the 4 ways we get to this with politics, society, culture, and then the business of music. Folk performers. What do you either know from reading this, things you've watched, talking to your parents, your grandparents? What's your thought or, just background of folk music when we say folk music?
Like my parents.
Like, okay, John says, like my parents, question mark.
Well, no, because
Okay.
I didn't have that kind of music. Like, not even my grandparents listened to that, so I don't really have a
Okay,
background in this. That's kind of weird for me to think about.
that's fair. That's very fair. Amanda, folk music, what do you think of when you think of the words folk music?
I think sort of like influenced by country, definitely, and then more like, I don't know, not as intense as like rock music and not as dancey as pop music.
Okay. Sorry, Amanda, you're good. It's okay, Miss Peterson. All right, hang on. 3, 2, 1. Whew. That's the headmaster. The big scary guy. Okay, start that over again. He was
Yeah, I
talking
was
in
just
my
saying,
ear. I couldn't hear you.
definitely influenced by like
He was talking in my ear. I couldn't hear you.
influenced by country music, sort of like not as intense as, and like electric as rock music, but then not as like dancey as pop music. I sort of think of like storytelling, like Appalachia area.
Okay, you're going in exactly the right direction. You're either a really good guesser or you've read ahead and you're kind of compressing some of these things. Yes, this lyrically and content-wise is so much heavier than the music, than the pop music, the popular music, the decade prior. This, for me, is where we really see folk music, I think, did, and this is just my internalization of this, I think folk music did more for rock and roll than anything else because it really served as a way to separate pop music from everything else. Because pop music, to this point, we call it pop music, we call it rock and roll. It was really interchangeable and kind of a squishy term. Well, now you have folk music that's on the scene, and it's not that it's new, it had been around, but it just wasn't mainstream. What else do you associate folk music with? I see the storytelling, musical style, more of country bluegrass style, not electric. I completely agree with that. What's another one? Delaney.
I don't know if it was true so much at this time, but like with at least like country, how it's developed, I think you get more of like they're singing about issues that are actually happening. Like they sing, if you look at a lot of country music, like a lot of it's about like issues that people can relate to. So I think that's one of the things that came out of it.
Okay, certainly this is the central piece of folk music, is that it is storytelling and is talking about relevant issues. What's going on in the 60s outside of music? Let's talk nationalistically. What's happening in the 60s? Vietnam. What else? Civil rights movement. Huge thing that's going on. This is a very far aside, has nothing to do with this book. But let me tell you this. I watched a fantastic movie this weekend called The Butler. If you've seen it, yes. If you've not seen it, I would say put this on the list of the next about 8 things you would see. Forrest Whitaker, it's historical fiction. This guy, he exists, but he doesn't exist in the manner that he's portrayed here. But it's a White House butler that works through 7 administrations, and you see the progression of the social things and the political things that are going on from the 50s through the current president and the current administration. It's really interesting to see how it really focuses on the civil rights movement and equality and how different presidents view this. So there's always some reinforcement through the music to society and politics. It all kind of goes together. But if you have a chance to spare a couple of hours and you're looking for something good to see, I would recommend The Butler. Very good movie, which makes me think about things that are going on with the civil rights movement in the 60s. We've come back from the Korean War. The Korean War wraps up in the mid-50s, late 50s, 56, I think. So we have another generation of war, of baby boomers. This is a smaller generation, but we've got another segment of war families now that we haven't seen. It was 10 years ago, and now we've got Vietnam. Vietnam drags on arguably for 15 years. I mean, it is really odd that Vietnam starts in the early 60s, escalates in 63 after Johnson becomes president for a variety of reasons, and this thing carries through to the early mid-70s. I remember, I was born at a very young age as a baby, but I remember in the late 70s that still being on television in 78, 79. I mean, so this is now my earliest memories. I can remember Vietnam being on television and the talk of the Cold War. And it really, as a 7-year-old kid, you want to be scared to death. On the news every night, it was talk about this imminent global nuclear meltdown, and no one is going to be here in a month. My little box of Army men, I played little Army guys, and I remember one day, the day I threw them all in the garbage, I was about 8 years old, and there was it must have been like the nightly news, like Dateline or the nighttime thing. Was just one big syndicated as ABC, and they showed this big troop buildup that was happening in Russia, and the next wave of the Cold War starting, and they showed all these missiles being paraded down the main streets of St. Petersburg and Moscow. I threw all my little Army guys in the garbage and went sat in my room and cried. I remember this because it was so scary, and the music of that time certainly reinforced, is the world going to be here tomorrow? Well, this starts in the 60s with Vietnam and people being very upset about an involvement in a war that arguably people felt like we had no business being involved in, but at the same time, we have every business being there because it's a social freedom and it's a social democracy thing that's going on in this struggle. So folk music are the ones that really got down into the very, very controversial aspects of our society and of our culture. And in a lot of ways, they propelled the content of rock and roll music forward, because until this point, rock and roll was not socially minded. It was very pop culture minded, and it didn't deal with anything that was in depth. Folk music comes along, splits out pop music from serious music, and then within serious music, now we have rock and roll becoming electrified, the more electric sound, but talking about really intense things. Woody Guthrie is probably one of the biggest folk singers, and Pete Seeger, and we're going to watch a clip, about 7 minutes of something that really captures a lot of this stuff. And there are the Weavers who get blacklisted. Why do they get blacklisted?
Because they thought that they had communist sentiments.
Oh man, yeah, communist sympathizers. The Weavers.
Woody Guthrie associated with communist organizations?
Yes. A lot of the folk singers in the 60s were all associated with being soft on communism. And remember, we're coming out of the 50s of Senator Joe McCarthy, and what was his deal? McCarthyism. Communism's bad. We've got to go find these people, and they must die, right? And it's a very nationalist, American-centric idea that we are very scared of things outside of our borders, because now there's this huge monster called communism that we now know very much firsthand about because of the last 20 years conflicts politically. Delaney.
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of times that's still true in music. If you're completely against the status quo, when the Dixie Chicks said something against President
George
Bush, they were completely blacklisted. They won't play music on the radio. They got death threats. So I think it's something that's still around, just for different reasons.
I'd completely forgotten about that. I'm glad you remembered that. And that's been 10 years ago that happened? Mm-hmm. That's been a while ago, maybe 10 years ago.
And they've started to tour again, in Canada and stuff, but they haven't, really gotten any traction in the U.S. again.
No, and that happened in the United Kingdom where they made the comment.
France.
Was it France?
Oh, yeah, it was somewhere.
I was thinking it was
France.
It was England.
England, but it happened that it was more than once that, and it wasn't just they said something once, they said something twice. That's interesting. I've forgotten about the Dixie Chicks.
They were ashamed to be
from Texas.
From the same state as President Bush. And I'll tell you, people from Texas are exceptionally proud people. So much so that we have bumper stickers for people who weren't born here. They say, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as fast as I could. And so when you get here, we give you a bumper sticker and some cowboy boots. So everyone here has that. That is a joke.
But then people made it into a bigger deal than it was, too. Like, everybody goes, oh, well, they just, like, they're against the troops and stuff. And they're like, no, we've supported the troops all this time. Like, they would go over and play shows and stuff. So it got blown way out of proportion, too.
Well, there is the media machine making that what they want it to be. It's interesting because, you know, the media, you talk about the fair and unbiased media in the middle, and you show me fair and unbiased media, and I'll show you, and I'll be 6.5 feet tall. It's all slanted some way. That's not good or bad. That's just, it's one of the really cool things about living in America is that we can have this media that is just, it can be wild and unproven. But had that, and I think, you know, that was the right-hand side, that was the right, it was the conservative right that grabs this, and that's the bastion they raise up of, they're anti-national, they're anti-president, and now they're finished, which is really interesting because typically entertainment media is very left-centered, or, you know, it's going to be left of center and not right of center, but much more liberal in its mind, and it's interesting that they kind of got caught up in the tractor beam of that, of some negative publicity. So, good example of that. And quality of folk singers. Oh, yeah, the folk singers, they're not classically or any legitimately trained people. It's just folks with guitars, acoustic guitar. One of the things I hate more than anything else is somebody under a tree with a guitar that doesn't know how to play it. It just bothers me. And I don't know why, and I try to not be that way. It just, I know you're practicing, I'll have to get better. That's the elitist musician in me that comes out, and I try not to be that way. But typically the folk singers are not real refined singers or musicians, but they do have something to say, and they produce something that's pretty cool. Anyone can play folk music. Yeah, you'll see an example of this thing we're going to watch in a minute of pretty much anything can become an instrument. We'll talk about Kingston Trio and these albums in just a moment, but I want to bounce over here to this. Oh. Refresh. Did it hold my spot?
Probably.
Please so. But don't start all this. Here we go. This is Woody Guthrie's son, Arlo Guthrie. And we're going to talk about him and one of his songs that's super famous. Come on. There we go.
The unique qualities of a time or an era are discovered after it has passed. What puts a place on the map is connected to what happened there that was special.
I don't think you can underestimate the importance of that little section of New York City called Greenwich Village to the explosion of creativity and politics and music and poetry and literature that took place from the late part of the 50s through the 60s.
Greenwich Village was built as working class housing by and large. And its reputation as a West Bank drew a lot of people here who did not buy into the, 2.5 kids and the car and the dog and that kind of stuff, where money was not the driving force behind your existence.
And of course, Greenwich Village was a progressive area of the city. It's where all the artists live, and the sculptors, and the poets, and songwriters, and eclectic actors, and this is where they could live differently than the rest of New York.
I don't think it ever came into my mind to live any place else but Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village was where it was
Delaney.
I can't hear it.
It just started playing for me too.
Oh, it did. That might have been because I muted my mic. Okay, that's good to know. All right, I'll just pick it up from there. When the fire alarm goes off, I'm just gonna let y'all watch about 6 minutes of this, hopefully not too much longer, while we go outside and stand in the cold. So y'all enjoy that while we go outside. Let me go ahead and reload this.
Gifted musicians were so wonderful just to be around. I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have been in New York at that time.
For their very first time on television, the Big Three.
Does anyone recognize the lady in the middle? Or the guy on either side, arguably, but the one in the middle would be the one. Any guesses? Cass Elliot.
Oh.
Does the name Cass Elliot ring a bell?
Yeah.
From?
I know this.
Anyone? Cass Elliot.
I know, I'm blinking really badly.
I'll call her Mama Cass.
Cass, yeah.
Mama Cass, who's she from?
I can know the
How about the song California Dreamin'?
Mamas and the Papas.
The Mamas and the Papas.
Thank you.
So here's the first group that she's in before the Mamas and the Papas.
Listen, this is a fire drill following emergency procedures. Listen, this is a fire drill following emergency procedures.
All right, here's our fire drill. We'll be back in a little bit. I'll enjoy this.
The village had always been, for several generations, a kind of hotspot of artistic and political expression. But in the particular time that I was involved, there was a ferment that was going on that was separating the young people of that time from the generation that came before it, the World War II generation.
In the early 60s, people were searching for something. They didn't know what it was, because what it was is that they really weren't searching yet. They were running away from something. And in running away, it was a free reign horizon. So they didn't even know what they were going to do with it, but they had it.
The people who settle in the village usually are looking for something else. They're looking for something that may make them something, make them more than they were, make them more than they are, and finally make them more than anybody else.
And I think most of the people that I came to have something to do with in the village were of like minds. We were all somehow, we had found a place where we all fit.
The village still had this wonderful character of being the old village. You had the village string shop, you had hippies before they even knew what hippies were, guys with long hair before anybody had long hair. And these people were different.
You know, people walked around with guitars hanging on their backs. People didn't have guitar cases. That was unthinkable. You just didn't have a guitar case. Nobody had a guitar case. A guitar case was for people who graduated Juilliard.
People there were very down to earth, whereas, you know, in the uptown parts of New York City, it was a little tougher. But the village was different. The village was a place where you could be who you were.
They were so free and they were so open and they were so, their minds were working and they weren't in that groove that we were all put into.
Some folk singers believed they had to perform a song authentically, in the traditional style with no deviation from the way the original singer sang it on the scratchy old LPs they listened to, taken primarily from Harry Smith's Anthology of American Folk Music. Those recordings were the holy grail.
I think that everybody learned a song from the Harry Smith Anthology, and I learned more than one. In fact, I cadged about 4 of those for the Lovin' Spoonful in these early days when nobody was even thinking about where did this song come from. You think they might like some publishing royalties?
It's very interesting when you think that the Harry Smith collection is they're not field recordings. Each one of them was released as a commercial recording, as impossible to believe as that sometimes is.
Listening to these songs written in the 1800s and the early 1900s, I came to the conclusion the world hadn't changed very much. And I went, wow, it's true. Even in song, they sing the same problems that we're singing now.
My first sight of Odetta performing seared an image in my brain. She is standing in a circle of light with her guitar, and when she begins to sing, the power of her voice obliterates everything else.
Please return to your classrooms and your offices. Please return to your classes and offices. Please return to your classes and offices.
Woody Guthrie in March 1940, a couple of weeks before, he had hitchhiked through Pennsylvania on his way with his thumb stuck out into the February wind. And when he went in for a cup of coffee, he heard God Bless America on the jukebox. And Woody wrote down verses which all America knows now. This land is your land. This land is my land.
This land is your land, and this land is my land. From the California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me.
Try singing it with me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you.
When you look at my dad in the context of the times that he was living in, he was a voice that was rarely heard in finer circles. And so when he came to New York, he was an actual living representative of what other people had been theorizing about, talking about. They were trying to make the world better for the common man, but most of them weren't very common who were actually thinking about that stuff. And my dad had the ability to appear more common than the most common guy you ever saw.
Woody Guthrie went through World War II with a sign on his guitar: "This machine kills fascists." After the war was over, he kept the sign on. We said, "Woody, Hitler's dead. Why don't you take the sign off?" He says, "Well, this fascism comes along whenever the rich people get the generals to do what they want."
I think the commercial folk boom has to go back to the Weavers in the early 50s, taking the country by storm, taking the charts by storm with the hits that they had prior to being blacklisted.
I had a chance to tell each one of the Weavers that hearing the Weavers at Carnegie Hall, which I did in 1958, I think, or 57, was really a transformative experience for me. I told all of them that by the time I heard the last song on side B, I'd undergone a chromosomal change from someone who really loved folk songs to someone who simply had to try to do it.
Well, we learned about folk music through the Weavers. I heard a record called The Weavers at Carnegie Hall.
Except we're not going to get attention.
57, summer of 57.
So pretty cold outside.
Me, meaning my brother Harry.
The sun was nice.
Steve listened to it all summer long. End of the summer, Harry said, we could do that.
I made up my mind I wanted to know all the Weavers when I was about 16 and figure out what made these people tick. Because I thought their music was so beautiful and they had so many aspects of what they did that were extraordinary. The harmonies, the drama, the fun, and the power of what they did was beyond anything else.
Come where all our friends will find us with an answer's there. Santa, join the celebrations. There'll be people there from every nation. Dawn will find us laughing in the sunlight, dancing in the city square. Santa, come and dance the hora. 1, 2, 3, 4. All the boys will envy me, but Santa, when the band is playing, my heart sings. Santa.
It was the love of the music.
All right, well, we're back from the fire drill. It was really cold outside this morning. Is my speaker on? Yeah. Okay, let's wrap up just a second. The group we just saw, the Weavers, they were the ones that got blacklisted for being communist sympathizers. When I see photographs of them, I think it's really interesting that, again, they're dressed up really, really nice to be folk singers, but this is, again, at the end of the 50s, going into the 60s, a very casual part of the 60s. I'm trying to remember what we missed. Did they talk about the record production and the original catalog of folk songs that were stolen by all the artists? Was that covered while I was gone? No. Okay, the fact, I look confused. Good. I didn't miss the big part I wanted to see of this. As we're walking out, Brian grabbed me and goes, "Hey, did you know that song got recovered that the Three did? And what was the tune?"
The Dink song?
Yeah, the Dink song.
It's in Inside Llewyn Davis, which is a Coen Brothers movie. Have any of you seen it? It's pretty good. It's just about Greenwich Village in the early 60s. But Marcus Mumford and the lead actor, I can't remember what his name was, they covered it. He's in the new. And the soundtrack is really good. It's on Spotify.
And they redid the Dink song. And that
Inside Llewyn Davis?
I did not know that. That's interesting that we get into that. Let me ask this question. How many of y'all have a Netflix account or a Netflix you can watch? Pretty much everybody? All right, cool. Amanda does. It looks like everyone does. Let me finish up by two things. Number one, if I have y'all watch some stuff on Netflix, will you do that? Because there are a lot of things like this. If this were a 75-minute class here, we would watch a lot of this stuff here, but we just don't have time to do it. I will email you some things I want you to watch and what we're going to do with this thing. The first of which is the documentary about Greenwich Village and the 60s. So if you want to kind of jot this down, it's just called Greenwich Village, the music that defined a generation. When you go into Netflix, you can search for that. It's age appropriate. There's nothing bad inside of it. I think it's PG documentary, so there's nothing questionable in there about that. But it does give some very interesting insight to what was happening socially and economically as to why Greenwich became the place that all this music was coming out of. Not so much the Brill Building, because that was the corporate side of what was happening in music, but just a handful of blocks away is Greenwich Village, where the rule is there are no rules, and this is really where the 60s generation was born. What was coming out of the Village. Certainly with Woody Guthrie and then his son Arlo Guthrie, and we'll talk more about Arlo on Friday. And if you've not ever listened to Alice's Restaurant, does anyone know the song Alice's Restaurant? Cool. Okay. Amanda does. How long is Alice's Restaurant?
Isn't it like 8 minutes? It's long.
Oh, yeah, it's 21 minutes long. It's 21 minutes long, but it tells the story of these well-to-do or well-doing hippies that want to go help somebody, and through this big long thing, they wind up almost getting drafted just by trying to help somebody take out some garbage. It's a very interesting song, but it discusses a lot of things culturally that were happening in the mid-'60s. If you have 20 minutes on your drive home and you want to be entertained and laugh, listen to Alice's Restaurant. They typically play that twice on Thanksgiving because it's a song about Thanksgiving dinner, with the red microbus and the tools and the implements of destruction. So that being said, I'll email you all a list of a couple videos I'd like for you to watch, and I'll probably start adding one of these a week, and we will talk about what's going to happen during the month of March, when we are not scheduled to meet at all. But there's still going to be a lot of work to be done during the month of March. That being said, are there any questions, comments, smart remarks to leave me with today? No? Chloe's no. Delaney's like rock and roll. Winter Park, are we set? We're good down there. I guess Tennessee was out of internet, so they couldn't even join from home for some reason. So, all right. Y'all have a good one. Be caught up on Chapter 3 for Friday. We had some few gaps today. Get caught up. And with that, peace. How do I do this? There we go.